Hi, my name is Lauren Witzke. I'm the executive producer for The Stu Peters Show. I was able to conduct one of the most important interviews that I've ever conducted in my entire life. I sat down with Antje Kingma. Antje Kingma was the senior district attorney in DeKalb County, Georgia. She also led the special unit focusing on sex crimes against women and children. The reason that I spoke with Antje Kingma was because she was the attorney that was called to defend Vernon Jones's rape victim in 2005. Here is our interview. How are you today, Antje?
I'm fine. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today. So we have been investigating the Vernon Jones, the very spattered history of Vernon Jones that it seems everybody is too afraid to talk about. We've met with, spoken to the police officers that carry the cases, have covered the cases and investigated them, and even they have been too afraid to come forward. But you were brave enough to step forward and have a conversation with us. Now, can you share with us a little bit about your work?
Sure.
What did you do in the state of Georgia?
Sure. I'm a former senior deputy district attorney working in the sex crimes unit, which involved crimes against women and children. Majority of my work really was related to rape cases. I became interested in that and involved in that because my best friend was raped several years ago, and I watched her decline, and I realized people needed to start really intensely looking at this, providing support for victims. I got involved in the DeKalb Rape Crisis Center, where we learned a lot about how to speak to victims, how to let them tell their story without forcing them to relive the story. Mm-hmm. And I had a number of cases which were on TV. I knew a number of journalists. So when Vernon Jones's, and in my view she was a victim, when Vernon Jones's, when she was victimized, one of the journalists contacted me and said that she was basically in a fetal position, sobbing, and was afraid to go anywhere and do anything, and asked me, because I had been a victim advocate, if I would help her. And so I made contact with her and literally found her shaking under a blanket. She was in the back seat of my car. She was terrified that one of the local police would see her in my car and would stop the car. She was terrified of Vernon Jones. She was terrified of the police, and it was known in DeKalb County how corrupt the leadership was, both on the commissioner level. Mr. Jones was CEO at the time, in the sheriff's department, and in a number of other areas.
So you had gotten the call from a local journalist
Yes.
who asked you, hey, can you please check in on this
Yes,
girl?
he knew of the work that I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was what you focused on, was sex crime victims, victims of rape, and you were their advocate, you were their person, their defender.
After my friend was raped is when I really, I saw the impact, the horrible impact this has on a woman, because she feels shame, she feels guilt, she questions how she ever could have gotten in a situation where she could be raped. So there's a lot of self-criticism and a lot of angst. And then on top of that, of course, with someone like Vernon Jones, he was incredibly powerful. He had, I don't think it was an accident that the police chief released the police report with my victim's name and address and phone number, which is an absolute no-no.
So she didn't want to, at first, name Vernon Jones.
She did not want to name him at all. She wanted to be checked out. Mm-hmm. And so what happened is she went to the hospital for a physical exam, And a hospital, like schools, are mandatory reporters. So the hospital did contact the police, and they sent a special nurse in to speak with her, and she absolutely did not want to disclose who it was. I mean, again, the fear, the publicity, the shame, she just wanted to be checked out.
Now, is that common with rape victims?
It is common with rape victims. It is because of the shame and the guilt you put on yourself. You know, you really don't want to. My best friend, I never could get her to go to the police, and she had, you know, obviously she was a rape victim. So then Vernon Jones's attorney, Dwight Thomas, went to the cameras, went to the journalists, and held up a police report, a hospital report, in which he said that she wanted to state who the assailant was, and that, you know, all she was really after was money, and it was just absolutely outrageous. And because she was my victim, she allowed me to get a copy of the medical records, and it had all over him that she did not want anybody to be involved. She was afraid of, Vernon Jones's connection with Eddie Long, who at the time was, leading a mega church, who later was, settled molestation cases.
So this pastor, Eddie Long, of this church, he was a bishop. He
was Bishop Eddie Long, correct.
He was Vernon Jones's bishop.
He was Vernon Jones's bishop. He was my victim's bishop, and he had an enormous church, and he was enormously powerful, and he was very well funded, and he and Vernon and the police chief, Louis Graham, obviously did everything they could to expose my victim not as a rape victim, but as an opportunist who was trying to get money. And, based on my experience and based on my work with victims, I've got a victim lying on my couch in a fetal position sobbing. It's it's pretty powerful, and you can't fake that.
Oh no,
you absolutely can't fake that.
No.
And the fear that she had was just, I was concerned for her safety, because under Vernon Jones's term as CEO, there were two very unusual deaths. One was the county attorney, who committed suicide. He had a lovely wife, lovely children, and many of us thought that he had somehow gotten sucked into this machine, and he was a good man. He couldn't take it. And then one of the commissioners, Lou Walker, who started questioning some of Vernon's doings in and outside the commission meetings, had a one-car accident, which really could not be explained. I actually tried to get the autopsies, and I had connections with the medical examiner's office, and they just said, "Look, Angie, we just can't give you these." So the span of power that he had was, for I think we had about 600,000 people living there at the time. It was just incredible.
Yeah, and they had the most powerful church, the well-funded church.
Yes.
That actually, we believe, candidates were selected at.
Yes.
They told you,
yes,
because you needed that church's vote to win or lose elections in that district.
Bishop Eddie Long would literally put, there was a sort of a rectangular sheet, and he would put who his congregation should vote for sheriff, for CEO, for district attorney. So everybody who was running for office was trying to kiss Eddie Long's ring, and
who was a child molester.
Who was a child molester.
Who was a child molester. That was also Vernon Jones.
It was men. It was young men. But it was really, it's frightening if you think about it, and if you believe in good government. And the people that I associated myself with believed in good government and made a lot of sacrifices for good government. And it was horrendous, the things that were happening.
Now, you had spoken about the victim, like when you got to her, she was shaking, she was in the fetal position. Now, when she was with Vernon, after the alleged sexual encounter happened, did he threaten her? We are hearing reports that he was threatening his victims after the fact, or begging them not to come forward.
Well, after the incident, I guess while she was getting dressed, but bottom line is she came out of the bedroom and he was naked, sitting at the bottom of the steps with a shotgun, begging her, please don't tell, please don't tell, please don't tell. And she was, completely rattled. I don't think she was in a place where she could say, okay, I won't tell, or yes, I will tell. I mean, she was absolutely traumatized. And after the begging didn't work, then he started threatening her. I will find you. I will find out where you live. And so he escalated. And that's almost also indicative of a rapist's behavior. They will try to cover it up, and then when they can't do it,
they try to gaslight you.
They try to gaslight you. Yeah.
So, and they tried to spin it as she was going after him for money, when she actually went to the hospital and begged everybody not to tell who the rapist was, because she knew who it was. She
wanted to meet him at a commission meeting to see if he could help her get a job, because they were both in the same congregation. And then he called her to come over to his house to discuss job possibilities. And he was very relentless. He didn't just call once. And yes, I've had employers who met me and called me and said, would you come in for an interview? But I've never been asked to go to somebody's home or a hotel room or anything like that.
Yeah.
Now, again, this is my opinion. This is based on what I learned at the DeKalb Rape Crisis Center, what I learned as a sex prosecutor, and what I learned working with victims. When you prosecute rape cases, you have to work with the victim, and you'll have to know how to talk to them without traumatizing them.
So the officer that I spoke with that was investigating the case of Vernon Jones, he was on his way to one of the victims in the hospital to take pictures of the victim. This is standard. This is what they do. They go through their belongings. They collect the evidence.
Sure.
Well, he got a phone call from his police chief, or the sheriff, one of the...
Louis Graham.
The one you had mentioned before, telling him, no, turn around, get back to the station now. It was a giant cover-up, is what I'm told.
It was a giant cover-up. Louis Graham is the same guy who released her name and address and phone number in the police report, which is absolutely unheard of. You don't release names of rape victims and then put down her address. I mean, she was absolutely terrified to go home. I don't know if you know the statistics, but 1 in 3 women is sexually assaulted during her lifetime, and this is Department of Justice. This isn't Angie Kingma numbers, this is Department of Justice. And so it's an epidemic.
It is.
And the problem with these kinds of actions is these men are repeat offenders. They do not just do it once. They will approach women. They will ask them to hotel rooms. They will call and make promises, and this victim was the only one that I worked with that had finally was forced to declare her assailant.
So, you had mentioned before that people like this don't stop. This is going to happen again.
Yes.
And before, he had people to cover for him.
Yes.
So my experience, Vernon Jones can't say he's a changed man. He can't say, that was 10, 15 years ago. He can't say that. As recently as this year, actually on the week of January 6th, Vernon Jones tried to get me in a hotel room with him, tried to get me to come to his hotel. And it's interesting you use the word relentless, because that is exactly how I would describe him. Because when I didn't come, he kept trying for the next time. Next time I was in Atlanta, what hotel are you staying at? Make sure you let me know where you are so I can come see you. We can get together and talk, talk politics. We've been trying to figure out what his MO is, the kind of women. And it seems that the best I would describe him is as a soul sucker. He sees ambitious women and then, hey, you want to go somewhere? Come have a meeting with me in private. Now, is that something common that you see with predators and predatory types?
Yes. Most predators are actually in a power position over the victim. So they can offer jobs, they can offer connections, they can, they have a power position over the victim, or they have the trust of the victim. And trust is, when it happens with family members. Power is when it happens with people like Vernon Jones.
So, we are looking at a campaign race where he is running for governor now. He was the CEO of DeKalb County. We saw what he did there, what he weaponized his political power and his authority and his money when he had it.
Yes.
Now, we're watching him now that he's a Republican. He switched over. He's preying on young girls at conservative events. We have multiple accounts of that, myself being one included. Is this something, if Vernon Jones were to become governor of Georgia, will this happen again?
In my opinion, based on the history and frankly, I agree to this interview because you were brave enough to talk about this. These are repeat offenders. It's common knowledge they're repeat offenders. In fact, when he decided to run for governor, I remember just putting down my head and thinking, God knows what's going to happen in that governor's mansion that I used to drive by it, every week. So he's not a changed man unless he's had serious therapy. But what you told me about the sort of relentless calling and always sort of offering something. As governor, the world is his oyster. And everybody is going to want to please the governor.
Right.
And
he signs the checks.
He signs the checks, and he is, unfortunately, he's being funded. I think he filed for bankruptcy last year and didn't have a penny to his name. Somebody is funding him. I don't believe that the people that are funding him really understand his, in my view, almost sociopathic mindset. He has no conscience. He has no guilt. He's very charming, and very engaging.
Yes.
And that makes him, in my view, even more dangerous. What happened to my victim happened 10 years ago. She's moved on with her life. I've moved on. I handled her pro bono. I felt so bad for her, and it was just so obvious what had happened to her. And in my opinion, people who do this sort of thing will do it again, particularly as they become more and more powerful. And you're reaching out, you're telling me your story, and giving more thought to the position that he will be in, and the threat to women around him, convinced me to talk to you.
Yeah, and it is concerning seeing how relentless he is.
Yeah.
It's also, in your opinion, did he do this? I know that your victim didn't get justice because she didn't want to. She didn't want to pursue it because she was scared, because this is a very powerful man. She didn't want to put her shame and her embarrassment.
No,
she was humiliated.
Yeah, I mean, it was awful.
Yeah, but in your opinion, is he guilty? Did he do this?
In my opinion, I mean, I never talked to Vernon Jones about this. I heard him on TV, and I heard his attorney on TV, and that was sickening, frankly. But in my opinion, based on the victim's behavior, and this, you don't fake sobbing in a fetal position on the couch, and you don't fake, being afraid. You don't, and the things she told me, and in my opinion, this happened. But I'm not a jury, I'm not a judge, and it's my opinion, but it is based on years of working with sex crimes victims, seminars, rape crisis center,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting where he came back out of nowhere, very well funded. Now that Eddie Long, his bishop, is no longer there, it seems he's found money elsewhere, and there will be more people to cover for people like him, unless we share the truth now and we expose it to people.
That is why I'm here. I think, in my opinion, the very worst thing that could happen to Georgia is if he becomes the governor, because you will note that even in his races for CEO, he got a lot of out-of-state money. And, it's just, he wasn't supported by his constituents so much. He's lost an assembly race. He faked living in the district that he was representing. He signed an affidavit swearing that he lived in the district, and it was just a bold-faced lie. And he was forced to resign. First he volunteered, and then he said to resign, and then he said, no, I'm coming back, and then he was forced to resign. So this guy is dishonest to a degree that, I fear about the government in Georgia with him in the driver's seat. And that's why I'm here.
Yeah. And we really appreciate you coming forward and talking to us about this. I know you've been retired, but you were there.
It's very hard for me to talk about it because you called me yesterday, and I was up all night thinking about victims, and I was very hesitant to come on TV, but this guy's got to be stopped.
That's when I spoke to you, yesterday. I knew you would understand because I'm watching this happen. Like, I'm seeing all the red flag signs, the relentless text messages and phone calls, and kind of like luring, like, hey, like, he's rising to power. He sees somebody like me as an ambitious woman, like, easy prey.
Yes.
What could have happened had I been like, all right, I'll meet you at your hotel room.
I don't want to know what could have happened. I mean, it's, and I really hope, I don't know how far-reaching your influence is, but I really hope that this gets to Mr. Trump. There's lots of discussion that Vernon might get endorsed by Mr. Trump, and I feel strongly that if Mr. Trump knew the caliber of this guy, that he would not endorse him. And there in 4 years there'll be another race. There's going to be a better Republican.
Yeah.
And
it's true. That's why we're here today. That's why we're sharing this with you today. Do not let this man gain the position of governor. He will rape, he will pillage, and then he will gaslight and hide what he has done. He has a long history of that.
Yes.
But not only that, he gaslights his victims. multiple reports of the sexual abuse cases with Vernon Jones. It's been, oh, I trusted you to come to this hotel room with me, or my house. I trusted you with this.
Yeah.
Please don't hurt me. Please don't do that. It's, it's a thing. It's sick and twisted because he just raped somebody. And,
the image of him sitting naked at the bottom of his steps, begging the victim not to report him.
With the shotgun.
With the shotgun. It's sickening.
Yeah. But so did she agree? Was she like, okay, I won't say anything just to get out of the house? Like, was she able to get out? Okay.
Yes.
She was able.
Yes. It wasn't easy, but she got out.
Yeah. It's, he wanted to hear from her that, oh, okay, I'm not going to implicate you before he let her go.
And then, it was so disgusting how they tried to make her out this woman who all she wanted was money. When it was clear, thank God, the nurses at the hospital documented that she did not want to disclose her assailant's name. Because then if she had disclosed his name, then he might have had sort of a seed of an argument. But it was so clear that that is not what she wanted, and that is typical rape behavior.
Really, that is through and through. He wanted. So what they do is they brought her to the light, not caring about how much it would hurt her or damage her, soul suck her. You know what I'm saying? By putting that label on her, by exposing her name, she didn't even want anybody to know it was Vernon Jones for a reason.
No. It's the last thing she wanted.
And they did it anyway.
And they did it anyway.
Knew if they exposed her name, then they could discredit her as a person.
And frankly, it opened her up to danger.
There's been a lot of deaths. There's been a lot of cover-ups, a lot of shady stuff going on.
There's a lot, I'm not a person who believes in coincidences. I mean, there are 2 coincidences, 3 coincidences, but with Vernon Jones, it is a pattern. And it's a frightening pattern.
It is a pattern. I can verify, seen it myself. And, he's hitting on my friends, conservative ends. It's like he's found a different prey pool.
Yeah.
A different, like, oh, well, if I run as this very powerful governor, as a Republican, everybody's going to love me. He's super charismatic, super charming, super deceitful. Everything about Vernon Jones kind of draws you in, his charisma.
Yeah.
And, that's what predators do.
Yeah.
They draw you in, and then they strike.
Yeah. And, yeah.
Yep. So, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate you talking to me. Is there any last words that you'd like to share with our audience? You had spoken to Mr. Trump. Please do not endorse this guy. It will be.
It will besmudge Mr. Trump. When you bring people like that in your fold, doesn't reflect well.
Yes.
And sooner or later, all of this is going to come out, and much more, I'm sure.
I think this is just the beginning, for sure. Short message to our audience. We want to thank Antje Kingma for coming today and speaking with us, the former sex crimes prosecutor and attorney and sex victims advocate with us today, for taking the time to meet with us, to share her story, to share her experience. Georgia, don't let this happen again. Vernon Jones can never be governor because it will get worse. You give this guy money, you give him power, he will destroy your daughter's lives. So thank you for tuning in today. I'm Lauren Witzke.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why